Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. You've doubtless heard about the Great Plains and the Dustbowl of the 1930s, and you've probably heard some explanation. The one that I most often hear in the college textbooks consists of something like the farmers were just farming it for profit, and they just drove the soil until it couldn't be used anymore, and then they would up and leave their farms when a drought struck or whatever, when the soil was too depleted and nothing would grow and it was just blowing away. Then I've also heard from the other side, the story, from the other ideological side, the story that the government was actually paying people not to grow crops. That's true. My own father has been paid not to grow crops in my lifetime. They actually ask how much you're going to plant of this, this, and this. Then they say, we'll send you an extra check for how many thousands if you'll take this 40 out or let that 80 acres lie fallow or whatever. Why? What the hell would the government try to stop food growth for? Because theoretically that raises the price of food. So you give the farmer a check for not growing food. He saves water and seed, so there's money in his pocket plus the check in his pocket, so it's a help to farmers. It's a program to help farmers, just like today, nowadays, we're obsessed with houses. Everyone has to have a house. Well, up until the 1920s, it was the obsession with the farm, actually up until the 1940s. It was the absolute obsession with farming, the small farm. The small farm mustn't disappear. We must allow Americans to have a small farm. Why? None of them want it. Nobody wants a small farm. They all want to work in a factory and go to the movies in the evenings. They don't want to work on farms. They don't want to live out in the middle of nowhere. So the government sets up these programs to give loans and pay people practically to be farmers. You end up with tons of people on farms who shouldn't be there. What should be happening is these farms should be consolidated and mechanization should have been used. Now, I have an interesting quote for you, now that I've set the groundwork, all this debate about the Great Plains and the Dust Bowl. Here's an interesting quote. I can't tell you who said it or anything yet. The Great Plains can be characterized as a region of periodical famine. Year after year, the water supply may be ample. The forage plants cover the ground with rank growth. The herds multiply. The settlers extend to their fields. When, almost imperceptibly, the climate becomes less humid. Rain clouds forming day after day disappear on the horizon, and weeks lengthen into months without a drop of moisture. The grasses wither, the herds wander warily over the plains in search of water holes. The crops wilt and languish, yielding not even the seed for another year. Another and perhaps another season of drought occurs. The settlers depart with such of their household furniture as can be drawn away by the enfeebled draft animals. The herds disappear, and this beautiful land, once so fruitful, is now dry and brown and given over to the prairie wolf. Then comes a season of ample rains. The prairie grasses, dormant through several seasons, spring into life, and with these, hopes of the new pioneers. Then recurs the flood of immigration, to be continued until the next long drought. Interesting quote. It's in a book published in 1931 called The Great Plains by Walter Prescott Webb. It's on page 344, and this little excerpt is out of the Yearbook of the United States Department of Agriculture, 1896. Irrigation on the Great Plains is the essay it's out of. 1896 is when that quote was from. Periodic Dust Bowl activities, circumstances. Periodically this happened. People come and settle and have to move away. More people come and settle when it gets wet again, move away. Brilliant. So what does the government do? They set up loans and financing corporations to try to keep the people on the land and try to help them not go broke or whatever. Well, we can't go into more of how people were able to hang on in the Great Plains and stuff, and what eventually changed them from having to leave necessarily and stuff. The windmill is the answer. That's an excellent book, but I thought that was worth its weight right there in gold, if a quote can weigh anything, to counteract the idea that the 1930s or the 1920s and the Dust Bowl was a one-off activity. It wasn't. It was a repetitive activity that had been noted as a cycle clear back in 1896 in government documents. They said, this keeps happening. And then in the 1930s, everyone's pulling their hair out saying, well, how did this happen? How did this happen?